Welcome back, everybody, coast to coast. This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us. Great to have you with us on the program today. Marija Fine is a naturalized American citizen who was adopted by the Reverend John and Selma Futchs. She grew up in Colorado and Texas, was graduated from Midland University in Fremont, Nebraska with a BA in history. She received an MA from the School of International Studies at the American University in Washington, D.C., taught English as a second language as an educational missionary for the Lutheran Church in Malaysia and an instructor at Taiwan Normal University in Taipei. As an educator in Washington, D.C., she was the school administrator at Bell Multicultural High School, consultant to the U.S. Department of Education, information specialist at the National Education Association, and computer professional at Wave, Inc. She's the author of the new book, Wide Eyes, A War Orphan Unlocks the Mystery of Her Latvian Roots Over 70 Years. And Marija Fine joins us on This Week in America. Welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Looking forward to talking about this book, and I mentioned Latvian Roots Over 70 Years. This basically was a book that was, 70 years in putting it together?
Well, it's actually about 2 years. I had no idea anything about my past because I came as an orphan. But through the years, I always wondered beyond what my adoptive parents told me about it. And so actually the research all was crammed into the last 2 years from 2014 to 2016 once I decided to go back to Latvia and went to the embassy prior to that, just to see if they had anything more about my parents. I wasn't sure they would have anything to report because all I had was a family name and an area where I was born in Latvia. So it's really when it started at that point in 2014.
Yeah, I mentioned 70 years because a lot of the early days you really didn't know a whole lot about it, and we'll talk about it during the course of the program. It was difficult going back and finding the records because of the war and the problems in that part of the world. First of all, Latvia, if you mention that, people would go, I've heard of that, but I'm not quite sure where it is. Talk about, first of all, the location, and then we'll go back to the beginning of your story.
Sure. Latvia is one of the Baltic states. It's situated between Estonia and Lithuania. It is one of the warm water ports, that is Riga, which is one of the reasons why Russia was very interested in the country. They needed warm water ports, and that set up many centuries of Russian domination. But that was not the only major country. It was also Germany, to the south of it, that was very interested in Latvia for very much the same reasons. And so it's always been, one of the small Baltic countries caught between two large, powers of Russia and Germany.
And this goes back years.
The story that I have.
Well, yes. Marija Fine is our guest on the program. Her website is Marija Fine, and that's Marija Fine.com. Book's available. It's Wide Eyes. It's available at Amazon all across the country. You can link on directly to Marija's website by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Let's go back to March 13th, 1944, when the world really turned upside down for you. Just a little history of how old you were at that time and what happened to the family. We talk about the ravages of war, and it's something most of us read in a history book, and it's nothing that we can actually relate to. You lived through it.
Right. I was part of the whole upheaval of World War II. I was from a farming family, a prominent farming family in Latgale in the eastern part of Latvia, very close to the Russian border. And during that time, Russia and Germany were vying for control of this little small country, along with Lithuania and Latvia. And so people had to take sides. My father, his brother, and my grandfather got involved with the partisans, with the Soviets. And the reason was not because they were communists, but because they felt that Hitler would lose the war. At that time, Hitler was in Germany. We were under German domination at that time, 1941 to 1944. And that's when I was born, in 1943. I was only 10 months old at that time when finally a family member, sadly, betrayed the persons in my family who were the partisans and turned them into the Nazis. So the Nazis came in to arrest everybody in the family, including my grandmother, grandfather, the uncle that I spoke of, and then, of course, my father. But unfortunately, it was only several of us who were actually arrested. That was including my mother and me, who was 10 months old at the time, grandmother and grandfather, and a great-uncle. My father and his brother were successful in escaping the Nazis. They ran up north to Lake Lubans, which was not too far, maybe 20, 25 miles away. And therefore, that meant that all of us who were captured by the Nazis were taken up to a prison in Rezigne, a town about 16 miles to the north of where we were. And in that process, they burned down the house that my father had, a house that was made of wood. And that's where it all started, at the age of 10 months, in the prison where I was with my mother, grandmother, and great, uncle.
Yeah, and you talk about that in great detail. The book is called Wide Eyes. It's available all across the country. I had to look at Amazon. You can go to Marija's website, Marija, Marija Fine.com. Only kind directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and getting information on that. The story of the concentration camp, the orphanage, which you found out about, and you actually found what your folder is. You went back years later and looked and was able to go back. In fact, I think you were number 3072 when you went back and pieced together that part of your life. But let's talk about when you were adopted. The Lutheran War Federation, talk about their role, because there were a number of children that got a fresh start in the United States because of that organization.
Right. Well, this is one of the very lucky happenstances in my whole experience, because, of course, from the time that I was taken to the prison and then to the concentration camp with my mother, where we were separated forever from that point on, the Latvians were in charge of my care, along with all these other Latvian children, as well as there were Estonian and Lithuanian children. And it was at that time, even under the Germans, the Nazis, that I was cared for by these people. They had to take us out from Riga, the orphanage there in Riga in Latvia, because the Russians were advancing on the city. They took the city in October of 1944, just about 5 months after I had been taken with my mother to the prison in Rezigne. Then when the Russians took over Riga, we had to be moved out. The Russians took us on down to Swinemünde in Germany, which is now part of Poland, and eventually to an orphanage in Honninkley. Now, it was when we were in Honninkley that there was a big battle going on between the British and the Russians. The Russians all wanted us back. The British said, no, we don't want them to go back into a communist-dominated society. And finally, it all came to a head in 1949, where the Lutheran Church, among other groups, was interested in taking care of the Latvians who were coming through the displaced persons camp.
Right.
There were about 190,000 such Lutherans, because that is the major religion in the western part of Latvia. So that also included the children, who included, I was part of 71 youngsters that were taken over from Germany to New York City. And at that point, the Lutheran Church took over the business of getting the families to be put into various communities that had Lutheran churches and were willing to sponsor the children and families. At that point, my mother and father, the adoptive mother and family, were interested in adopting one of the Latvian children. And it happened that my father had a brother, Carl Futch, who was in charge of resettling many of the people and children. And so my parents said, we would like a child, male or female. It made no difference. And so that's how my aunt and uncle vetted a few of us and chose me to be the child that my parents would adopt. So that's how my mother came out from Boulder, Colorado, and it was love at first sight when we saw each other, and we both came on that journey from on the train out to Colorado, where I was then officially adopted by John and Selma Futch.
We're talking This Week in America. Our guest today is Marija Fine. She's the author of the book Wide Eyes, A War Orphan Unlocks the Mystery of Her Latvian Roots after 70 years. Let's talk about when you decided in 2014, circumstances were such that you really decided, I'm going to focus basically full time on going back and piecing my life together, because up to this point, it was rather difficult to put everything together. You mentioned you went to the Latvian embassy in Washington, D.C. As I read, at first they weren't real sure what they were going to be able to do for you, but you get a phone call basically saying, we've got good news for you. What was it like when you realized at the embassy, I think they can really go back and fill in these blanks and I can find out who I really am, where I came from?
Right. Well, they were the start. They, first of all, found out the name of my father and the name of my mother and their birth dates, and that was a lot more than I ever knew before this. And so then I decided I would take the name that the Latvian embassy gave of a man who had the same last name. He was in the same area, Latgale, in Latvia. And I called him, but we had this language problem. He didn't speak English. I spoke no Latvian, and I thought, I've got to do something about this. If I'm going back, trying to find any family, I've got to have a translator. So I called the American Latvian Association in Rockville, Maryland, and they gave to me the name of a person, Lars Olofs, who was a family detective. Well, his business was to find a family for people, whether they were in Australia or Canada or the United States, people who were hoping to find their family in what was Soviet Latvia for 50 years. This is one reason I could not even hope to find who my parents were at that time. So this Lars Olofs had a website. I wrote to him. I said, I understand, you can look for family members. Can you help out? And he was the key. He was able to call that same man that I could not talk with, and he found out he was not related to me, but he, in turn, gave names of other people, and eventually Lars found my Aunt Leonora, the woman who was 16 years younger than my father and is the only surviving sibling. And she was the one who opened up the family history. I, therefore, was able to go to Latvia, meet with Lars, and then go to see this Aunt Leonora, and also a half-brother who was born to my father in his second marriage. So it was quite exciting to be able to find someone who was living at that time.
And you were really able to find out about your life in great detail. Excellent pictures in the book Wide Eyes by Marija Fine, our guest on This Week in America. Her website is Marija, Marija Fine.com. Go to thisweekinamerica.us and link on directly. And you've got a picture in there, for example, with the church where you were christened. What was it like as you were going through this process? It would be almost like each day was sort of like Christmas Day all over again, wouldn't it be, when you would find out information? It had to be exciting.
Yeah, and the fact that I had no memory of any of this happening to me when I was a baby, an infant, was really quite a remarkable feeling, simply because happily all the buildings, many of them that I was in at the time, were still standing. My grandfather's house was still standing, not my father's, which was burned down, but my grandfather's house still standing. I was able to walk through the rooms where my parents' wedding reception was held, where they spent their first night after their wedding. I was able to go into the church where I was christened, where my parents were married. And, of course, I was able to go to Salisbury, where I was separated from my mother, and to see part of the wall of the nursery where I was kept for a few months while I was there. So, yes, it was quite remarkable that the buildings could stand. Even the orphanage in Riga, where I was for about 2 weeks, kept there, where the building has not changed at all. So amazing to be able to be in the very same buildings, even I was on the outside of Rezekne prison. They don't allow anyone to go in. It has not been made into any kind of a monument or museum. But I was able to actually see the physical buildings or be inside them to make up for any memory that I just was not able to hold or have at that time.
It's amazing, the discovery process with the family detective, and this is not like you get online with Ancestry.com and you piece all of this together. Literally, hundreds, possibly thousands of documents to go through and missing documents and putting the pieces together. This really was an exhaustive search to be able to come to this point where you can go back and reconstruct your life.
Yeah, this is where it was very wonderful that Lars was able to go to the archives and to the National Library in Riga, and he had to get permission from me to be able to go into documents. He was able to get, for example, my orphanage record, where I was able to see the careful records that were kept on my, entry into the orphanage and growth, physical growth through the several years that they kept those records. And there were many archive records that they were able to retrieve. So, yes, luckily in my case, there were so many documents. I mean, without the Internet, it would also have been very difficult to get a lot of the history that went on at this time that my family was all a part of.
It's interesting. We mentioned the family here in the United States that where you grew up and came in 1949, and you mentioned in the book that they always encouraged you to understand your roots and to be proud of where you came from. And then to be able to go and to really go back and reconstruct that. Again, years later, what was that feeling like, that satisfaction after you were actually able to, the reunification process, that you actually been able to go back and put this together? What was the emotion like?
One of the things I've appreciated about doing book signings with Latvian American communities, whether it was in Washington, D.C. or Seattle, and there's one upcoming in Minneapolis, and hopefully in Frankfurt, Germany, where I'm going to be attending the International Book Fair in October, is that I've been finding people who were part of my past who came forward. One was the nurse's aide in the orphanage that I was in Honnenklee, Germany. I was just blown away by that because she came walking up to me, or actually in her wheelchair, saying she had been there at the same time. We didn't recognize each other. It's been, 70-some years.
Yes.
But that was wonderful. And then in Seattle, I was able to meet with a gentleman who had come over with his family to Boulder, Colorado. He knew the adoptive parents that I had. I was able to connect with him. In Minneapolis, there will be another person who was in the same displaced persons camp that my mother was in, and she happened to know this same gentleman that was in Boulder, Colorado, that my parents had helped, in the acculturation process. So it's a coming back home together with people that are here in the United States who were Latvians who went through the same experience that I did. That has been extremely rewarding.
Got about a minute or so left in the program. Were there periods of time when you thought about just giving up on this search? I know enough. My life is going great here. Were you close to just abandoning the search?
Oh, no, never. I think I kept getting more and more information, and obviously still many more questions that were unanswered. But I just found it amazing to be able to dig up so much information and to get a lot of it from, like, the International Tracing Service in Germany that was able to find records on my mother at the time she was going through all the camps, and even the NKVD files, which is now the KGB, on my mother when she came back into Latvia. There was just so much information out there, and I couldn't get enough. There were many friends and family members who said, tell me more, what's going to happen next, what else have you discovered? So it has been exciting.
And the book is so well written, and I feel like a member of the family after reading the book and seeing the pictures and understanding what the family went through. And again, we so often hear about war-torn countries and really can't relate. And I feel like I've just been through that journey with you. The book is an excellent read. It's called Wide Eyes, War Orphan Unlocks the Mystery of Her Latvian Roots After 70 Years. Marija Fine, our guest in the program, and our website is marijafine.com. That's Marija. And you go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link on and get direct information. Thank you so much for being with us on the program. I can tell by the passion, the excitement still in your voice. These were years well spent in laying the groundwork and putting it together. A great inspiration to others who have gone through similar circumstances where it's difficult to go back and piece things together. And I'm sure you would encourage them to do it because the end is well worth it.
I definitely agree, and thank you for having me.
You're listening to This Week in America. Information on all of our guests, including Marija Fine, available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. We're back after these messages. Stay tuned.